Yeah, it's not that I've fully grasped it, but I've definitely improved the way I think about it. So, like, I know now it's a form of knowledge. And the other thing I think I realized is that so context is it's not an absolute. So the context isn't everything, but the context is in a given situation, what are the units of information required for you to integrate the next unit of information? So, like, um, finding practical examples is always hard, but um, if I say, going back to that lecture, the Peacock lecture, if I'm like the plane is my plane is 2 hours late, that assumes that you know that I'm flying somewhere. If I just say that out of for no reason, then it makes no sense, right? But once you know, okay, Jonathan has said he's going to fly to this and this place, you can integrate that information. You're like, that fits into the context. But what's not the context is that planes exist, physics exists, because those are all assumed things. You've already integrated that information into your knowledge, right? And so it's
Um,
next unit of information is. That's how I think of it so far.
I think context more just what is that information? Um, where is information coming from, basically? From who, from what, from where? That's usually how I think of it, which you use to integrate the next piece of information. But it's not necessarily just for new things. I mean, it could be to explain something that you've already known, or it could be to think about and consider something you've already known. It doesn't have to be a new thing. Just the context is just the environment, the information that can tell you what to think about, how to think about it, how to integrate it, or
Context,
information to do that.
it can be that, but would you agree then? Like, okay, in because that was those ideas. Remember, we discussed with journalism, I think, who, what, when, where, something like that.
Yeah,
When a reader doesn't is assumed not to have that specific context, because that is a context then. But then, if I'm like sitting down with you and having a conversation, and we're sitting in a park, the
yeah,
park isn't part of the context. If I say something like my plane is 2 hours late, in that case, the context is
right,
that I'm flying somewhere. And so you need that bit of information that I'm
right.
flying somewhere, and we've discussed that to integrate the next bit. And so in that, because it's always situational, I was thinking like, okay, it's not an absolute. It's there's a specific thing that context is referring to. And then, you know, of the information that I'm flying somewhere, obviously there is another context, which is like there are planes or whatever it is. There's like different levels. And so if you have to assume there are certain levels of context, but then the one you want is the last one that you need to integrate the next bit of information. Because all the contexts, like one context holds all the previous contexts as well, because we're conceptual, we integrate information. Anyway, that's sort of how I thought about it. To
Yeah,
be
I think that's a good start. I mean, of course, I'm saying I would probably change things about, but I think you're on the right track better than where you were at first. I think that's definitely progress, and you're right. I think in many regards, what you're saying that like yeah, going in the park isn't really part of that context of the conversation. It's not relevant to the discussion. It's not relevant to what you're saying about airplanes. It's not really what you're talking about or what you're referring to, or even like aware. Like you might need to know that, like, oh, we're at an airport. Then that might be relevant information, or just say what you're doing on. Like it's a way of discussing and understanding what you're talking about. And yes, it's something you would use to go on to then use that information to then integrate with. I mean, the context isn't what you're integrating per se. It's more like it just sets the boundaries, as I like to emphasize, and the who, what, where, and why is what those boundaries are. And you're right to say that, say, being in a park wouldn't be part of the boundary you're trying to talk about. Like you're going to be taking a plane. Like it's not a plane would be relevant to like, oh, like what time does it arrive, or what time do you have to leave for the plane, or things like that might be relevant to the context.
Yeah. What do you mean though? It sets the boundaries because like that didn't fit into the way I thought about it before.
I like to emphasize boundary because you're trying to exclude things outside the the boundary. Like the the boundary of the airplane might be like, well, it wouldn't be a park because that's outside the boundary. It's not really where you're talking about, or where you're going or anything relevant to what's being integrated. There's certain information available in the world pertaining to planes, and there's no known way that being in a park right now has any bearing on that, or any direct bearing on what you're talking about.
Well, according to Peikoff, where all knowledge is interrelated, and
Well, it's interrelated.
All entities are interrelated.
Correct.
The park has relationship to the plane.
It does in a very distant sense, but as far as context, when we're focusing on particular essentials and trying to figure out what we want to be thinking about, that's what the context can direct you towards. I mean, you're right, there's a connection between it, but the connection just means to say that that we can't integrate something into the concept, like say universe, and we can integrate many pieces of information together because everything is at least connected in some way. It's not like you have in a separate universe one context in another universe for another, and those are totally different information. I mean, in a way, you're just context is just how you subdivide reality, how you cut it out, like say what physical area, what time and what space, what level of abstraction. Maybe like if you picture reality as existence as a giant cube, and your context is just the piece of the cube you cut out.
I don't see it that way.
Okay.
Firstly, I didn't get, but I know you mentioned that I'm right in that contexting everything is interrelated, but honestly, I still don't get that. I went through the thing. I've got questions on that, so we can talk about it later. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, but I do not get that. I can't say I get that whole concept of everything is connected anyway. But to the point, yeah, I don't see it that way. I'll tell you why. Because with the way I explained it, the context was necessarily holding everything before it. But it's not the context. Like there's no, obviously, when we say the context, we're referring to something specific, which in this case, the context required for you to integrate, I'm catching a plane in 2 hours, is only maybe 2 bits or 3 bits of information. Like Jonathan said he's going to fly to Hawaii, and he said he doesn't have long to hang out because he's gonna fly to Hawaii later this afternoon, but I'm meeting him anyway. So like just that bit, if you didn't have that, it wouldn't make any sense, right? But once you've got those 2 bits of information, that's enough. But the thing is, those 2 bits of information also have their own contexts. Those contexts we assume. So like flying to Hawaii, there is a place called Hawaii. Like there are planes, there's physics, there's like all that. So all that stuff is then, rather than like a slice of the cube, it's more like, I don't even know how to think of a metaphor, but you know what I'm saying? It's like there's this piece of information I'm giving you, and obviously that piece has a big context, and then you can eventually get to existence exists and causality and volition and all that, but you don't, because you don't need to. That stuff's all already integrated in the concept plane, for example. So it contains the whole universe in it already, but the context is that specific integration you're focusing on at the moment that allows you to take in the next unit. But so all of the universe is contained in each integration. But so the context, if you want to use it in absolute, is every single thing. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense. But
I think it does. I think that clarifies what you're thinking better. I do think that sounds mostly correct. I wouldn't say you're wrong. It's just I would word it differently, but I don't think it's wrong what you're describing. The only bit I get confused on was when you say like for integrating the next bit of information.
Yeah.
Or it could just everything. Well, everything before I understand, but what does he mean by the next piece of information?
So I mean, the next piece of information. So for me to make this, I'm gonna have to go concrete because I don't know how to word this abstractly.
Yeah.
Sorry, but for me to I'm just thinking of a simple conversation here, nothing more than that. But for me, like if someone says something in a conversation, when it strikes me out of context, like let's use this, I'm catching a plane in 2 hours thing. it strikes me out of context when I don't have any way. At least this is what I say to myself. That was just out of context. Why did that person say that? When someone says that, it's because I don't have the unit. I don't have the context or the knowledge to make like fit what they're saying into what we're talking about, or them as a personality. But if I know, for example, that they're going somewhere, or if they've told me, I'll think of another example. Maybe we'll make it clearer then. What's another good example of context? Like if I messaged a friend and just randomly said, "Hey, do you have 5 pencils?" Like that would be out of context, right? They'd be like, "What? Why does this guy like? What's going on here? This doesn't make any sense." But
Yeah.
then if they knew that I'm working on some kind of big art project that I was telling them about, that I need specific pencils for, and I can't go to the shops or something like that. Those two little tiny things, which they're not big concepts, they're just tiny bits of information, suddenly allow you to integrate that pencils thing and may go, oh, okay, he's doing this thing for the design.
Okay, that makes more sense. I don't sure.
Super long-winded way to describe.
Yeah, I think those are good examples, though. I mean, those are good concretes of what a context would be, and that having certain bits of information makes it understandable or graspable what that phrase even means. I think that's a good way to look at it. Like you could just say a sentence and without any context around it, like, why did you say that? What does it mean? Like it could mean many things. If like, is there a different meaning of plane that I don't know about? Like, is it like a plane on a graph, like in geometry in calculus class, or is it a plane like that you fly? Like that could change things. But so you could set that so yeah, asking questions could then like figure out, well, what is the context of this statement? That's kind of what you're saying. Like, what would you ask them to understand where they're coming from? Like, what do you mean by a pencil? Why do you need 5 pencils? And when they answer, that's kind of like setting the context. Oh, I need it for an art project. Well, here's the context of these pencils is like an art project. In the context of the conversation, you could say is the art project. Yeah. And you can go from there. And I think that's the fine way to look at it. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's exclusively for integration.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's once you know the context, you can integrate more information into it. I think that's a fair way to say it.
Yeah, I didn't know how else to say it because I agree. Something like, I'm working on an art project is not a concept, but I don't know how. I mean, that's the closest I've gotten to getting closer.
Yeah, that would work as part of the context.
Yeah.
What the person meant to say.
Yeah, so maybe getting a bit closer to getting that. But I went through, to be honest, I didn't go through the whole, I'll do it all later, the unity in epistemology and ethics. I really don't like audio stuff, but
yeah,
because I can't, like, people will say something and then I don't get it. Like, I need to be slow to read things and ask lots of questions. Otherwise, I just don't get what's going on.
Yeah.
I hate it. So, but anyway, I went through the parts you marked, and we can go. I got some questions about that, so maybe we can go to.
Yeah.
Go to that. It's on page 17. You'll see. Marked it all up.
Okay.
Oh. Excuse me, I've slept very badly past 2 days. So tiredness is not because this is boring.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Okay, let's see the other lessons, what they were anyway. You got, okay. I do remember most of it. So the state of the universe implies every concrete, leaving aside free will.
I didn't, to be honest, that whole thing was like, what does it mean applies a causal relation near a remote, direct or indirect to all the rest? Like, how does everything causally relate? And then I was like, well, maybe I don't really understand this whole thing of cause and effect like very well. I understand it in the abstract, but not like very
direct to be like a billiard ball hitting another billiard ball. To be as direct as you really can get, like they collide. And distant would be maybe like we said, that, think of many dominoes, like one hits the next one, then the next one, then the next one. So the last domino out of like 100 would be more indirect than like billiard ball hitting one other billiard ball.
Oh,
Or
okay.
then it could be more indirect, like, say, when people talk about World War One, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand started a world war. And you can say the results of World War One led to World War Two. So this one event of an assassination, you could say from a distance, caused World War Two, but in a very distant way and not directly, and only with as a consequence.
Yeah. Okay. I get that domino example. So the finger is the cause, and you could, I mean, if you just want to, in this language, then the last domino is like a distant cause, or the finger is the
Yeah,
distant cause. I don't know. But I
you'd call
sort
it
of,
a distal cause, I think,
okay.
to
So
use the technical term, but
the
to
finger is
say
the
far away.
finger is the distal cause then to the knocking down the last domino.
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. That makes
And
sense. So,
Aristotle has four different ways of thinking about causality. There's like the mechanical cause, like pushing over the domino, or there could be. I would just look up his four causes. I mean, they're not very complicated, but they're good to know about.
yeah. Are they still used today?
People talk about it, yes,
Wow.
mostly in science, if anything.
Wow.
Sometimes,
Jesus, still today. All right.
yeah, like my uh, what behavioral psychology teacher used the terms a lot.
Hmm. Okay, I'll look that up. It's interesting.
Yeah. Why does he leave free will aside?
Yeah, the
I
state.
honestly don't know. I found that strange too. I would have to ask him, I think. I
Okay.
would just be guessing.
Maybe it's like something to do with, because I remember early on I was talking about like free will, or not free will. Man is like a cause himself or something like that. So maybe it has something to do with that, although I don't get that. So
I think it was kind of like leaving it aside. It's like free will is part of this, but it's so complicated. Let's not talk about it right now. I think that's kind of the gist I get from it. Like, we're trying to focus on the concrete things that we don't control, because then it's like a whole monkey wrench in it when you throw in free will. It doesn't cancel anything out, but it's more difficult to talk about, I think. And that just probably deserves its own lecture on its own, probably. That's my best understanding of what he means.
okay, cool. Well, if you're confused, that's good news for me. Um, the interconnectedness of all knowledge. You can't show this in detail, but in pattern you can show to grasp one piece of knowledge fully implies grasping the total of human knowledge. All right, so is the process here a generalization or like an inference or whatever? And then similar to like when you say all men are mortal, like it's not like I have some way to immediately see it in front of me. Yes, this is true, but I'm okay with the generalization. Like I see living things die and I see men, I see funeral places, and so I know that all men are mortal. Is it the same kind of jump where you go from like he's saying you look for the pattern that all knowledge implies other knowledge, and then you just make this kind of generalizing jump of like, okay, well, all knowledge is contained is what is it? One piece of knowledge implies grasping the total of human knowledge. Like, is this kind of process? Because when I read this, I'm like, okay, I sort of see there's some connections, but then I'm supposed to just make the jump and go, all right, well, all knowledge contains, one piece of knowledge contains all knowledge. I don't know if that rant makes sense, but
Yeah, that reminds me of his book, The Logical Leap, because we're trying to, by that term, he would mean that based on all this information or patterns, what can justify your leap to say that you can generalize? So what justifies your leap of logic to then say this is true and this applies to this concept and this generalization is valid? like what would justify that leap? And that is a difficult thing to show, because that'd be more even detailing even more specifically a complete theory of induction, which I wouldn't say even Rand had. So that's kind of what he's talking about. He doesn't have the whole proof of it. And not to mention that if you wanted a detailed proof of it, maybe to show that everything in the universe is connected, like you would need some sort of supercomputer or something, probably to simulate everything. But you can show the pattern of it, the pattern of thinking. He's not proving it to you, but he's just showing you a general pattern that may convince you, I think. So I would think about it. It's not a proof per se.
Okay.
But he can't show you the details of the reasoning in an hour. You might need a whole book to do it, but the pattern you can see, like grasping one piece of knowledge can imply grasping something about all of human knowledge, at least implicitly.
Yeah, okay. So what's the generalization? I didn't buy into it, but I'm open to being convinced, like, okay, this is a process of generalization. Generalizations can be valid. Here's why, and then this is why you should believe this. But otherwise, I was like, well, I sort of see, but I still don't concretely. I can't go, yes, this is true. I just can't say that. So
Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult question. Like, what makes it valid to make that leap to your generalization? What makes a leap a generalization? So what Peikoff is at least trying to do is to say that at least this information can be connected, that the universe is a unity of all these things. So that connection makes it possible to generalize. That we can combine things.
So he gave the example of the plane is late by 2 hours. How does this presuppose it relate to the sum of human knowledge? And then I didn't get, why is he saying all knowledge, it's not necessarily your personal context or concrete mind? Isn't that the point that, like, for you, all knowledge implies, he's making the statement that all knowledge implies all other knowledge, but what does this have to do with, like, knowledge that you don't even have? I'm really confused by this. Like, how does it imply, like, all human knowledge that you haven't even understood, or imply knowledge that other people don't even know yet? Like, that just, to me, is like, I don't get this at all. Yeah.
I just think of the interconnectedness is more in terms of how the concepts are developed, that those concepts were developed with prior knowledge in mind, and that we're not talking about knowledge that you hold in your head, but the knowledge of insofar as there is human knowledge, that is just all the variety of things man has discovered over time. You could say it's all of that is connected, and he's talking about that because by understanding interconnectedness, you could see that the way you can develop knowledge or build on knowledge, or that knowing one thing does have implications on knowing another, the structure of how we know. It's all connected in and not our own concrete mind, because we're not just trying to say focus on like all knowledge that a child has is interconnected with the all sum of human knowledge. I mean, that would be a bit insane to say, but I think it would be possible to say that all the knowledge that the child has is interconnected, and I think that would imply all knowledge, the knowledge of mankind, is also interconnected.
What do you mean by that? All knowledge a child has is I'm confused by this as is, like the section, the whole section.
Okay.
I sort of get like what he's saying. He's trying to come from the metaphysical basis and then giving an example of how, but I'm still, like why did you say all knowledge of the child is interconnected? What is that? What was the connection of that to this?
Well, I'm saying that even in more limited context, too, of just a child. Anything that they've learned since they were born is at least connected to something else they learned already. It's not like they'll learn something about like how to say mama, and it's not like that's completely disconnected from, say, knowledge of, I don't know, that dog's bark. That's harder to explain because there's so much that a baby has been learning, but what kind of implication would knowing that dogs bark or that stoves are hot has to do with knowing the word for mom?
Sorry, could you repeat that? Knowing, what's for knowing the word for mom?
I'll put it this way. Knowing that a dog barks and knowing that stoves are hot, or don't touch hot stoves because they're hot, and how would they be connected is one way to think of it, and
I don't know how they'd be connected.
it's a hard one. I just came up with that. It's actually pretty tricky. How would you even connect a hot stove with dog's bark? I mean, I guess.
I think that's wrong, because this is what the mistake I was making, and ask you a question about this later when I asked you, like, what's the connection between crocodiles and physics? Like, this whole thing of interconnectedness of knowledge. And the wrongness in it is that, I don't know if this is right, but this is what I reasoned, that he's taking something and then working backwards from there to identify the chains in the links of knowledge or whatever. But he's saying it's not necessarily knowledge in your mind. So if that's true, then you can't just go, what's the connection between this and this? Because that knowledge might not be in your mind. So you're kind of, that's what I was doing. And I was like, oh, okay, so you're supposed to, like, that sort of makes sense. But
yeah, I think that's an error on my part then.
Well, I mean, I made the same, that was what I was doing. Remember, I asked you about what's the connection between physics and crocodiles.
Yeah, I was trying to make that connection, but I guess I misrepresented the context just now. I mean, that's almost a case of dropping context. I didn't realize I did it.
How is it
dropping? You're right. I think you're right.
How's it dropping context?
Because we were talking about what Peacock was talking about is like connecting knowledge backward from the sum. It's not necessarily just about like the example I was giving wasn't like working backwards. It was assuming they're even connected in the first place, which I shouldn't do.
It's funny because we discussed dropping context as evasion last session. And so it's not dropping context. You just didn't make the connection, which is what I didn't do. And you didn't make the connection between what he was saying in this very specific part of the lecture and that. So dropping context would be evasion according to your last tutorial. So you're wrong on this count.
But it wasn't on purpose.
You didn't drop context. Anyway, whatever. But
yeah, I think you're right in what you were explaining there.
But that's only according to him anyway, so it would be the wrong question, but I still don't buy into the whole, I don't buy into it just because I don't quite see and understand why this is true. But I've got more questions related to it, so.
Yeah, I think the best way to even start thinking about it, even to validate if he's right or wrong, is just try to think about, just start with examples he had. Thinking about things that you happen in, I don't know, it's just a matter of trying to find two pieces of knowledge and human knowledge and connecting them or reducing it either way. And that's the difficult thing. I think a lot of it has to do with that you can reduce many things to the same thing. Like you can reduce a lot of information to just a perceptual level to a few things, go from many things to a few things. You can narrow it down, I think.
I've got an idea. Right now, let's try an exercise where we both, because he said this in the lecture, he was like, he gets a group of people and he says, he asks them, what does this imply? So let's try and look at one item, glasses. Okay, you've got glasses, so we'll try, what do glasses imply? So I'll just say a few and then I know physics because there's like optics, I think is
optics.
Optics. Well, there's like a metal frame or something, right? So there's
the metallurgy.
Metallurgy.
Um,
Metallurgy implies. Oh, we could probably. Yeah. Okay. What else? We'll add more to that.
like let's see,
Uh,
like well, or like mining, like how to make,
oh yeah,
like
mining.
identifying different types of ore.
Optometrist.
Yeah, which say medicine. Well, medicine's too broad, I would say. That wouldn't be reducing it. That'd be making it more abstract. Because
Okay.
it implies that.
Well, it doesn't need to be reduced. It can be a link. I think that was the idea. It can just be a
Yeah.
link. Like, what does this rely on? Other
Yes, true.
relies on.
Do
Oh,
glasses rely on that? Maybe not. I mean, just the glasses themselves don't imply. I mean, you could just buy glasses anyway, regardless of seeing the optometrist. But you could throw that in. I mean, it definitely implies the knowledge about optics, ophthalmology,
what's ophthalmology?
eye medicine.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Ophthalmology implies Latin or Greek because there's ology, which is the study of something.
yeah, or
So
even implies what
is it
Hippocrates,
Lat? Is it Latin
what
or
he
Greek? I
said.
don't know.
I'm not sure.
Ology.
It's Greek.
It's Greek.
Ology's
Yeah.
Greek.
So there's ancient. There's an implication of ancient Greek, and then I know there was this philosopher called Aristotle. So there's an implication of Aristotle. And then mining, I know we can eventually get to like tools, right? Like
Yeah,
knives and or like stone things that you hit with,
yeah,
whatever they're called, hammers.
yeah.
Um,
Those were
hammers implies tools, implies humans fashion things to adjust the environment to themselves. Um,
yeah. Or with Aristotle, we can go like, well, we can say, oh, this medicine as a study goes back to the ancient Greeks, and we could say Aristotle's part of that because he talked about the four humors, which is a way of thinking about sickness and health,
yeah, you said
and
Hippocrates.
Hippocrates.
We'll just
And that could go to be like civilizations implied. How do you even have a person able to spend the time to think?
yeah,
You need
okay,
like a
cool.
civilization.
Civilization. Um, what else is in there? Let's see. Oh, maths, because like the shapes, they have to all
Yes,
these linear shapes, right?
yes,
Maths as well, and then that implies all those Greek like Euclid or
yeah,
whatever.
Euclid, yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
then I mean, that's a way to connect all that to the ancient Greeks. And then we get
Geometry.
to civilization again. Like, how do we get civilization? Well, we need like tools, like we mentioned, like to make buildings.
Yeah.
Um,
What are those
having
the rubber stops as well? You've got what are they? What are they? They're rubber.
They're usually rubber.
Rubber stops, and so that might be the rubber tree, which is in only certain countries, right? I don't know which.
Yeah.
There's something like that would anyway. So the rubber stops would imply globalization, and that might imply what was his name? The guy who got to America. Um,
Columbus.
Columbus, yeah, Columbus. That would imply. Anyway, I think that's probably enough. We sort of get the. So okay, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if you do tons of those exercises with lots of people, we might start to become more concrete and clear.
Yeah.
But like, look, we got Aristotle, we got Columbus, we got civilization, medicine,
Mhm.
hammers, Euclid. Um, what else do we have here? Ancient Greek, yeah, physics, and then that could probably be a whole. So
Yeah.
that's something. He did that. That makes it a
Yeah.
bit clearer, but it's still like you have to make. I guess if you do that, yeah, maybe do more of that, and then you can
Mhm.
make the leap.
Yeah. You made me think of the game Civilization, where you
What's
are
that?
trying to build it. Where it's like a turn-based game where you start at the beginning of civilization, like pre-writing, and you set a little city, and you develop the city, you can do research and make buildings. Like you begin, say, by researching archery before, say, before you learn about horsemanship, or you have to learn about like how to mine copper before you learn how to mine iron, like that sort of thing,
Oh,
and it
okay.
builds up from there.
Oh, cool. So it's like a lesson in hierarchy.
Yeah. So yeah, see the development across time and even how previous things rely on each other, previous developments rely on other ones, and how you couldn't get to this later state of knowledge without the prior one.
Mm.
That even branches out like a tree. You start out with somewhere simple, then branches out all over the place.
Ah, cool. Um, yeah, maybe it is. Now I'm thinking about it. We did that. We did it briefly. We could probably keep going, but no point for now.
Right.
But maybe if you imagine if you did that exercise with like 40 well-read people for like 8 different things, at some point I think I maybe see like, okay, this is starting to be more like, this is making more sense. You know what I'm saying? But to make the leap from just a small example, like over 2 minutes in a lecture, is a bit more difficult.
Yeah, and that's part of the Wikipedia exercise we did a bit last time.
Oh,
Everything could
right.
go back to philosophy. Like
Yeah.
we could have gone to philosophy too. Like we fix civilization. I mean, that's a valid way to go, but it just depends how you organize it. But it does imply that web of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's
Mm.
really a big giant web.
Oh, by the way, there was a thing I liked in that part of the lecture, in the parts you highlighted or in between them.
Yeah.
Apparently, Ayn Rand used to ask Leonard, "How's your universe?" And I thought that was pretty cool. And it was. He said like it wasn't an affectation for her. Everything was so integrated that she'd like be, "How's your universe?"
Yeah.
That's so cool.
How's your universe?
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, what do you think the genus and species of context is? If I put you on the spot.
Genus and species.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's a definition, right? Like, because
Yeah,
the
but it's still a
definitions.
valid question.
Yeah.
Genus, species
Genus.
is.
Genus. Genus.
I almost feel like genus is a. How could you be more general than context? I guess universal might be the only kind of thing I could even think of. What is universally
I
true? I
found the.
guess
I'm pretty sure I
axioms.
found the answer on objectivism on the forum, so I'll I'll tell you later. But I still don't know
The
anything.
axiom would be almost what I think is the. No, it's not a type of axiom, so could it be that way? A genus of. I don't even know how to answer that really when
Cool.
I
I didn't
think
either.
about it.
I looked up everything. I googled like so much stuff on context. So I bookmarked like 10, like I said, quite a few pages. And someone said something in one of the forums or threads or something like that. Someone says context is a type of knowledge. So it's actually the genus is knowledge, but it's a specific kind of knowledge. And I was like, that makes sense, actually. And then the species is like whatever it is about the whole integration, like the units that you. I don't know that part, but the genus of being knowledge. I was like, yes. Like, how else would context come up if there's no such thing as knowledge?
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, could it really be a type of knowledge? I mean, you could have knowledge of context, but I don't say that not context is a type of knowledge. I mean, the context exists, I think, regardless of what you know. And but in a way, you could call it a type of knowledge because it's a. I would almost say a type of identity. It's more how I would think of it. Context is a type of identity. The species being identity of um, the the range of integration is maybe how I would put it. That's the species.
What do you mean a kind of identity?
Like every characteristic could be a kind of identity. It's an aspect of identity. Identity could be like cars are red. And that's just not red is like the identity of the car, you could say. That it's not in and of itself red isn't knowledge per se, but red doesn't exist apart from objects. You can't have red in the universe detached from any object. Like things are red. That's kind of what I mean. But red doesn't exist on its own. Do you know what I mean?
Not really. As in,
Like
it's pretty abstract. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You can't really think of red that's not on anything. Like, you don't say, oh, there's red. You say, oh, there's a red fire truck. There's a red apple. You kind of there's red. You don't see like it's always a thing.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. And the same way you can't. I mean, identity would be context. Would be like it's not necessarily a thing you see there, but it's a certain characteristic of, I guess, some set of units. So that's what I mean.
Can you think of, okay, so would you agree that knowledge can be perceptual and conceptual?
Yes.
What is it? Is there a kind of context that only exists perceptually?
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, just time and space, the most direct kind there is, I think.
What's that a context for?
Well, just the particular units, like this time and space. Like,
But
I don't know, like these 3 oranges in front, the 2 oranges and an apple in front of me.
But to who is that a context? Like, what do you mean time and space is a context, and to who? Like, try to be as specific as you can. Otherwise, I just never understand.
Okay.
I never follow.
To a child integrating into the concept apple,
Mm-hmm.
you have the 2 apples in front of them and an orange, and how do you integrate them into the concept fruit, or how do you integrate the concept from there into apple, say?
Okay.
Then you need to say understand that part of the identity of all 3 things, like they exist in a time, they exist in a place. Time being just now, and place being, I don't know, like on the left side of the table, the middle of the table, and the right side of the table. And those would be very concrete aspects of the context.
I'll write that down because it will take too long for me to work through that with you. So what did we say? Context is a type of identity. We can explore that. And then time and space.
Is probably the most concrete aspects of it.
Aspects of it. Child integrating. What did you say? Orange and
2 apples.
2 apples. Will that be enough? If I write that down, will that be enough for us to pick up the conversation next time?
For me, yes, I'll remember. And then time and space being the most concrete. Or just write down the species being the range for integration. I can explain it more next time. That gets more into concept formation, but I'll try to keep it as direct as I can just to context.